When most people think about money, they imagine something solid, something backed by gold or silver, or at least the promise of a government. But what if I told you that for the last 50 years, your dollar has been backed by nothing more than an agreement with desert kingdoms and the threat of military force? What if that agreement just shattered and everything you thought you knew about money was about to collapse? The petrodollar system just died. And if you don't understand what that means, you're about to get crushed by what comes next. For half a century, the United States has enjoyed a privilege no empire in history ever possessed. Every barrel of oil sold anywhere on Earth had to be purchased with American dollars. Every nation that wanted energy had to first acquire dollars, creating an endless demand for American currency. It was the most brilliant economic trap ever devised, and it made America the most powerful nation on Earth. But that system just ended, and the consequences are going to reshape everything. Most Americans have never heard of the petrodollar, even though it's the foundation of their entire way of life. They see gas prices at the pump, they complain about inflation, but they have no idea that their ability to live beyond their means for decades has depended on a deal struck in the Saudi desert in 1974, a deal that just expired. Here's the story they don't want you to understand. After World War II, the United States emerged as the dominant global power. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, backed by gold under the Bretton Woods system. Countries could exchange their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. It was stable, predictable, and it worked, until it didn't. By the late 1960s, America was spending far more than it could afford. The Vietnam War was burning through cash, domestic spending was exploding, and the government was printing dollars faster than it could mine gold. Other nations started to notice. They began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars, and America's gold reserves started vanishing. In 1971, President Nixon faced a choice. He could either raise taxes, cut spending, and accept a painful recession, or he could break the promise that backed the dollar. He chose to break the promise. Nixon closed the gold window, ending the convertibility of dollars to gold. Suddenly, the world's reserve currency was backed by nothing but trust in the American government. This should have been a disaster. When a currency loses its anchor to real value, it typically collapses. Other nations should have abandoned the dollar and found alternatives. But America had something no other nation possessed, the largest military in the world, and a plan to use it. Enter the petrodollar. In 1973 and 1974, oil prices quadrupled during the Arab oil embargo. The world was desperate for energy, and the Saudis were drowning in dollars from selling oil. American officials, led by Treasury Secretary William Simon, flew to Riyadh with an offer the Saudis couldn't refuse. The deal was elegant in its simplicity. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil only in dollars, and it would invest its surplus dollars in American Treasury bonds. In exchange, America would provide military protection for the Saudi kingdom, advanced weapons, and a guarantee that the House of Saud would remain in power. Other oil-producing nations were pressured to follow suit. Those who refused faced sanctions, coups, or invasion. The result was the most powerful economic weapon in history. Every country that wanted oil had to first acquire dollars. This created artificial demand for American currency, allowing the United States to print money without the immediate consequences of inflation. When dollars flooded global markets, they didn't stay in America long enough to drive up domestic prices. They were absorbed by the constant need to buy energy. This system allowed America to live far beyond its means. The government could run massive deficits, fund endless wars, and maintain a global empire, all while exporting the inflation to other countries. When America printed money, the world paid the price through higher energy costs. It was taxation without representation on a global scale. For 50 years, this arrangement held. Saudi Arabia became one of the wealthiest nations on Earth. America maintained its economic dominance, and the rest of the world had no choice but to play by American rules. Oil was priced in dollars, central banks held dollars as reserves, and international trade flowed through the dollar-dominated banking system. But empires built on coercion eventually face resistance, and that resistance has been building for decades. China, now the world's second-largest economy, has been quietly working to undermine the petrodollar for years. They've signed bilateral trade agreements with oil producers, allowing payment in yuan instead of dollars. They've built alternative payment systems to bypass American-controlled banking networks. They've accumulated massive gold reserves, preparing for the day when hard assets matter more than paper promises. Russia, facing waves of sanctions after various international conflicts, accelerated its de-dollarization efforts. They began selling oil and gas in rubles, euros, and yuan. They reduced their dollar reserves and increased their holdings of gold and other currencies. Every sanction pushed them further away from the dollar system. Other nations watched and learned. Iran, Venezuela, and others began accepting payment for oil in currencies other than dollars. The European Union explored creating its own payment systems to reduce dependence on American financial infrastructure. Even traditional allies began questioning why they should remain trapped in a system that primarily benefited the United States. The cracks in the petrodollar system became visible during the pandemic. Supply chain disruptions, massive money printing, and geopolitical tensions exposed the fragility of dollar dominance. Nations that had trusted American leadership watched as the Federal Reserve created trillions of dollars out of thin air, diluting the value of their reserves. Then came the sanctions war. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States and its allies froze Russian central bank assets and cut Russian banks from the SWIFT payment system. The message to the world was clear: if you displease America, your money can disappear overnight. This wasn't just economic warfare against Russia. It was a threat to every nation holding dollars as reserves. The response was swift and coordinated. Countries that had never been allies began working together to escape the dollar trap. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, accelerated their plans for alternative currencies and payment systems. Saudi Arabia, America's oldest and most important petrodollar partner, began accepting yuan for oil sales to China. And then, just weeks ago, the unthinkable happened. Saudi Arabia announced it would not renew the petrodollar agreement that had anchored the global financial system for 5 decades. The kingdom would now accept payment for oil in multiple currencies: dollars, euros, yuan, yen, and others. The exclusive relationship that had made the dollar indispensable was over. The mainstream media barely covered this story. Financial news networks mentioned it briefly, then moved on to other topics. But make no mistake, this is the most significant monetary event since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. The foundation of American economic power just crumbled, and most Americans don't even know it happened. What does this mean for you? It means the era of American exceptionalism is ending. For decades, America could print money without consequences because the world needed dollars to buy energy. That artificial demand is disappearing. When countries can buy oil with their own currencies, they no longer need to hold massive dollar reserves. The dollars that have been circulating globally for 50 years are about to come home, and when they do, the inflation that America has been exporting to the rest of the world will finally arrive on American shores. This isn't speculation. This is the inevitable result of losing reserve currency status. History shows us what happens when empires lose their monetary privileges. The process is slow at first, then accelerates rapidly as confidence erodes. The signs are already visible if you know where to look. Central banks around the world are reducing their dollar holdings and increasing their gold reserves. International trade agreements are being signed in currencies other than dollars. Alternative payment systems are gaining adoption. The infrastructure for a post-dollar world is being built right now. The American government knows what's coming, and they're preparing for it in the worst possible way. Instead of addressing the fundamental problems that led to this crisis, they're doubling down on the very policies that created it. The Federal Reserve continues printing money at unprecedented rates, hoping to maintain short-term stability while ignoring the long-term consequences. Politicians promise more spending, more programs, more debt, as if the laws of economics don't apply to America. But economics is not politics. Reality doesn't care about campaign promises or patriotic speeches. When a currency loses its anchor to real value and its artificial demand disappears, the outcome is always the same. The purchasing power collapses, savings evaporate, and the people who trusted the system the most suffer the greatest losses. Think about what this means for your daily life. The groceries you buy, the gas you pump, the rent you pay, the salary you earn, all of it is denominated in a currency that just lost its most important source of global demand. As countries shift away from dollar-based oil transactions, the excess dollars will flow back into the American economy like a flood returning to its source. This isn't a gradual process that will take decades to unfold. Currency collapses accelerate once they begin, because confidence is fragile and trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. When people start to doubt the value of their money, they rush to exchange it for things that hold real value. That rush becomes a stampede, and the stampede becomes a collapse. The parallels to historical currency failures are impossible to ignore. Every empire that has tried to maintain power through monetary manipulation has followed the same path. Rome debased its currency to fund endless wars and eventually watched its silver coins become worthless bronze tokens. Spain flooded the world with American silver and destroyed its own economy through inflation. Weimar Germany printed marks to pay war reparations and created hyperinflation that wiped out the middle class. America's situation is different in scale, but identical in principle. For 50 years, the petrodollar system allowed the United States to export its inflation to the rest of the world. Countries that needed oil had to accept dollars, even as America printed more and more of them. This created a pressure release valve that prevented domestic price increases from reflecting the true money supply growth. That pressure valve just closed. The excess dollars that have been circulating globally, suppressing American inflation for decades, are about to return home. And when they do, the American people will finally experience the true cost of their government's spending addiction. The early signs are already appearing in asset prices. Real estate, stocks, and commodities are reaching levels that have no connection to underlying economic fundamentals. This isn't prosperity, it's monetary inflation expressing itself through higher prices. As more dollars chase the same amount of goods and services, everything becomes more expensive in dollar terms, while becoming no more valuable in real terms. But the most dangerous part of this transition isn't the inflation itself. It's the government's response to inflation. When currencies collapse, governments always blame external forces. Speculators, foreign enemies, greedy businesses, anyone except themselves. They implement price controls, which create shortages. They increase spending, which accelerates the currency's decline. They impose capital controls, which trap citizens with a depreciating currency. Venezuela followed this exact playbook. The government printed bolivars to fund social programs, blamed American sanctions for the resulting inflation, imposed price controls that emptied store shelves, and finally restricted citizens from converting their savings to more stable currencies. The result was economic collapse, mass immigration, and the effective abandonment of the national currency. Argentina has repeated this cycle multiple times, each iteration following the same script. Print money, blame external forces, impose controls, watch the economy crumble, reset with a new currency, and begin the cycle again. Each collapse destroys the savings of ordinary people while the politically connected escape with their wealth intact. The United States has advantages that Venezuela and Argentina lacked: a more diversified economy, deeper financial markets, and stronger institutions. But these advantages are not permanent, and they cannot overcome the fundamental mathematics of monetary debasement. When a currency loses its reserve status and its artificial demand disappears, the outcome is predetermined. The question isn't whether the dollar will decline. That process is already underway. The question is how quickly it will happen and how severe the consequences will be. History suggests that once confidence breaks, the decline accelerates exponentially. The pound sterling lost its reserve status gradually over several decades, but the final collapse happened within a few years during the 1970s. The dollar's fall could be even more dramatic because of its unique position in the global financial system. Unlike previous reserve currencies, the dollar is used not just for international trade, but as the foundation of the entire global banking system. When that foundation cracks, the reverberations will be felt everywhere. And here's the cruel irony: the people who will suffer most are those who have played by the rules. The savers who trusted banks, the workers who accepted dollar wages, the retirees who planned for the future using dollar-denominated investments. These are the people who will watch their purchasing power evaporate while the politically connected elite protect themselves with hard assets and foreign currencies. This isn't a distant threat or an abstract economic theory. This is happening now in real time as central banks dump dollars and oil producers accept alternative currencies. The infrastructure of American monetary dominance is being dismantled piece by piece, and each piece that falls accelerates the process. The petrodollar's death isn't just an economic event, it's the end of an era. The closing of a chapter in American history that began with Franklin Roosevelt and reached its peak under Ronald Reagan. For nearly 8 decades, America has been able to print its way out of every crisis, export its inflation to the rest of the world, and maintain living standards that far exceeded its productive capacity. That era is over. And what comes next will test every assumption Americans have made about money, wealth, and their place in the world. The petrodollar system that propped up American power for half a century is dead. The dollar that you earn, save, and spend is about to face a reckoning that most people can't even imagine. History shows us that when reserve currencies collapse, they take entire civilizations with them. The only question left is whether you'll be prepared for what's coming, or whether you'll be another casualty of monetary history repeating itself once again.